What is up, everybody? It is Tuesday, so I got my guy So Real Sunil with me. We have tons of topics at hand. The 49ers have named their number 2 quarterback. Kind of. Bosa might be close to signing. He is with his agent in New York. And then Sunil and I also have to talk about some things that we're confident about after 2 preseason games and some things that we maybe are concerned about after 2 preseason games. And we're going to do all of it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And as I said, it is Tuesday. So I got my guy, So Real, Sunil in the building. Sunil, what's up, my man?
Dude, this new camera angle is messing up all my intros that I do with you. I don't know where it's like. I'm like, okay, it condensed me a little bit, but I want to say shout out to Jesse for making the channel big enough to where now he's that way. Got all the sponsorships. It's awesome to see how well you've grown, over the past couple of years, man. So next level up till you on ESPN spitting all the facts.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, you see the sponsors below. Also, I figured, you know what? Why not give a little eye candy? Why not be different? Everybody's kind of the same in this space as far as how they deliver shows. And I think it's awesome. The format's not going to change as far as the things that we talk about. But I think hearing us talk while also watching some All 22 may not be a bad deal. So you got a little eye candy throughout the show. Let me know in the comments what you think of the change. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Just curious to see what your thoughts are. That being said, we do have some people in the comments already. We got Gammon says, Jesse, why do you hate the 49ers and Trey Lance? You know what you're doing, Gammon. You know exactly what you're doing. It's so funny because obviously the conversation is always about like Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. And if you talk good about one, why do you hate the other? And Gammon will be in my like chats every once in a while, and he'll say, man, why do you hate Brandon Allen? I don't ever hear you talk about him enough. So I think it's a good spin. I love it. Gammon is one of the better ones. I really appreciate him and what he brings to the channel as well. That being said, Nick Bosa still not signed by the 49ers. However, we might be getting close to him being signed because he is now in New York with his agent, per reports. And Shanahan talked about Bosa today. A little bit surprising, at least for me. He was asked about, when do you think Nick Bosa will be signed, or did you think it would be prolonged the way that it has been? He goes, yeah, this is pretty much how I expected it to play out. So overall, what are your thoughts about Bosa being in New York with his agent and Shanahan saying, yeah, this is what I expected the whole time?
I mean, I don't think that's an unfair statement. Like, I believe him when he says that. And I think you would too, Jesse, because we knew what this was about, right? We know the Bosas. You were way ahead of this as far as, I think, even before the season was over, when we were talking about Bosa's extension. This family, this is what they do. And I think they always want to reset the market. I think, if I remember right, Joey Bosa had reset the market when he was a free agent. They want to do that as well with Nick Bosa. And, the D lineman over there in Kansas City still hasn't signed. So I think that the San Francisco 49ers understood that this was going to be, they needed to sign after everybody else signed or overpay, right? Those are the two options. So I could see that, the 49ers obviously getting closer and closer to week 1. They want to get this done as soon as possible. I'm sure over there in Kansas City, they're going through the same type of urgency right now. So I believe Kyle Shanahan when he says, I expected it to go this way, just because of the circumstances around a couple of big name D linemen in the same offseason, and the Bosa family being pretty headstrong when it comes to contract negotiations. Like, it's not a far stretch to me that this is what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, most definitely. Golden Dragon brings up a very good question here. He says, what are the chances Nick Bosa plays out his final year of his contract? Is there reason to rush? I don't, there's not reason to rush from the standpoint of, okay, they have to sign him or else. But there is reason to rush from the standpoint that Bosa, I don't think, will play a single solitary snap unless he's signed. Like he doesn't have to. He'll just sit out. And he's the type to do that. So I think the 49ers have a rush from that standpoint of, hey, if we don't pay him, he's not going to play. So we better figure it out. I personally can't see Bosa playing without a contract. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason to rush for Bosa because this is his last year of leverage.
Yep.
Right? After next year, he loses leverage once he becomes, once he play out his contract, because now the 49ers could just franchise him. And, then it becomes where maybe he doesn't recoup the money he misses out on being able to not play games and fines and all that kind of stuff. So to me, yeah, I think this has to get done now. And I think that you're right. I don't think, I think Bosa's fine with not playing any games until he gets his new contract. And he knows that whatever fines and all that kind of stuff will be recouped in that new contract. And but once again, I think that is his name Chris Jones, the guy over there in Kansas City?
Chris Jones. Yeah.
If Chris Jones had signed 2 weeks ago, I think Bosa would be signed right now. I think they're both kind of waiting and playing chicken on who's going to sign first, because I think the other one wants to make sure they make more money than the other one, type of thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's a shot in hell Kansas City pays Chris Jones what Bosa gets paid. That's just me personally. We'll see. I mean, Chris Jones may be hoping for that.
Yeah.
I don't see any world where that happens. I could be wrong, but I feel like this one's a little bit different than kind of what you've seen in the past with that. Shout out Third String All Pro. He says, of all the sponsors, Jesse's got the best one. Yeah, I love the SeatGeek sponsor. For me, I want to brand the channel with things that I use myself or would use myself, and I don't gamble. So all those gambling sites, what have you, like if it's for fantasy football, sure, like I'm in because I do play fantasy football, but I personally don't gamble on games, so I don't want a sponsor that's a gambling sponsor. It just doesn't fit my personality or what I would prefer. So but SeatGeek, I mean, everybody buys tickets, whether it's to games, concerts, what have you. Like, tickets are available. You might as well save yourself $20. That's the way that I see it. In fact, I'm going to the preseason game this weekend, Tampa Bay versus the Ravens. I'm bringing my son, and I found preseason tickets pretty close for like $50 a pop, and then save the $20. So it was a no-brainer. Why not go check out a preseason game? You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
There we go. But yeah, as far as Bosa goes, I am a little bit surprised. I did think that it could drag out a little bit, and I was on it last year saying there was no chance that Bosa was going to sign last year. He was going to bet on himself, which he did, and he won. But then the flip side of that is I also thought he would be here by day one of pads, and we're well past that. So I don't know when that date is. I've got to imagine, though, if he's left Florida and is in New York, they're getting close. And Shanahan doesn't seem concerned at all. So if Shanahan doesn't seem concerned, I'm not going to be concerned. I'm not going to worry about it. Bosa is going to be there. He should be there. I would be shocked if he's not. But I think we're starting to get close with the sign of him being in New York with his agent. And I think that's why it's a talking point now, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to talk about it later in the show, but 49ers need Bosa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, hey, breaking news out there. Hot take, but I'm going to say the 49ers need Nick Bosa this year.
Right.
Hot take. Hey, kill me for it, but I think it's a hot take. Argue with a wall. So yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's talk about this QB2 situation. Shanahan basically came out today and said that there's a strong possibility that he could rotate QB2 throughout the season between Sam and Trey. Now, one thing that he did reveal with this whole conversation is that he basically is saying that it's Sam and Trey and that Allen is not going to be on this roster. So that much he's pretty much made clear, unless they're shopping one or both of Sam or Trey, and one of them gets picked up by another team or traded. I think Allen is pretty much all but gone, and it's going to be Purdy, Darnold, and Lance. Those are your quarterbacks. And then week in and week out, he's going to be rotating who the backup quarterback is, depending on who knows what. So what do you think of his approach here with the backup quarterback spot?
It's going to hurt to say, Jesse. You know I come on here every single week and state how big of a Shanahan I am. The man could do no wrong. Well, he could do some wrong. But, I'm over here positive on him, seeing the bigger picture, silver lining all of the dark clouds. I'm here for that beacon of positivity when it comes to Kyle Shanahan. His statements on Trey Lance, when he was talking about this QB2 situation, he basically mentioned how Trey Lance needed to work on a lot of things and he's getting better and all of this kind of stuff. But it wasn't like the resounding, confident, like, this is my guy after Purdy. I am ready to say that if Kyle Shanahan doesn't come out and make Trey Lance QB2, this is a black spot on his coaching legacy for me. Not legacy, but I will have to back off on I would level down on my Kyle Shanahan, because he is, if
go
Trey
from
Lance
a Shanahan to a Shana fan, is that
yeah, it would be.
Okay,
yeah, I think that's accurate. It is ridiculous that we are still discussing this going into week 3 of preseason. You mentioned, I saw you on X, I guess it's called now. You shouted out Nick Wright because of his take, and it was a short clip. I actually watched the whole segment, and him and Bomani Jones.
It was good, right?
Yeah,
it was good. Yeah,
him and Bomani Jones made some really, really great points. And the biggest point that I think I took away from it, and I'll pass it over to you, is how much better is Sam Darnold going to get? And you haven't invested anything into Sam Darnold compared to what you've invested in Trey Lance. And we're seeing how much better Trey Lance is going to get if he just gets more and more reps and more playing time. So I'll say this, Jesse. If Trey Lance doesn't get significantly more playing time in week 3 of the preseason than Sam Darnold, I will officially come on the next Tuesday and say I'm no longer a Shanahan stan. I am only a Shanahan fan, and we'll go from there.
It's funny because before I saw that post, I was, let me make sure. It was a couple hours before I saw the Nick Wright thing. I had retweeted Akash. Now, I'm going to give you some context. Akash said, how many picks does Lance throw with the Jets and Adam Gase and the Panthers and Matt Rule? I understand Sam has not been a good player leading up to his tenure here, but we're talking about the backup quarterback. And he said it in all capital letters, which to me is very condescending. And I said, why does he continually get a pass? Why does Shanahan, and he being Sam Darnold, I said, and why does Shanahan get a pass if he chooses Darnold over someone he invested 3 first-rounders in? Darnold hasn't been better in practice or preseason, and Lance's upside is higher. So why wouldn't you continue with Lance? I don't get it at all. It doesn't matter how you slice this thing. Going the Sam Darnold route makes no sense. It doesn't make sense from an upside standpoint. It doesn't make sense from what you've invested already standpoint. It doesn't make sense on even who's better. Even if you think Sam's been better. Like, there's people out there that believe Sam has been better this preseason. Okay, let's concede that. I'll agree with you just for the sake of argument. Has he been so much better that you can just forego Trey Lance? No. And then to top it off, everybody says, well, it's money. It's about money. It's money, money, money. No, it's not. Because if Sam Darnold actually plays real football, his contract can be more than Trey Lance's. And every time he steps foot on the football field, if Brock Purdy gets injured, that money goes up. So if it's about money, that doesn't make sense either. There is not a single point you can make that will sway me on this. None of it makes sense. The only way it makes sense is if you trade Trey Lance. But if he's on this roster and so is Sam Darnold, the fact that you have gone back and forth here, or you may make Sam too, or whatever the hell you're going to do, anything other than Trey Lance being the guy behind Brock Purdy makes no sense to me. Absolutely none. And you can't sway me any other way. You just can't do it, period.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty set that we all know Brock Purdy over Trey Lance. And, I stated last week, I don't think Trey Lance, even though he's had minimal opportunities, in those minimal opportunities, he hasn't, separated himself enough to be in that QB1 discussion quite yet, because I don't think he's going to get those opportunities to show that. But when it comes to Sam Darnold versus Trey Lance, there is no debate for me who should be QB2. All of the points you made, and even more than that, like, if even you want to trade Trey Lance, let's say that, as a QB3, there is no market for him to be traded for you to get any type of recourse for that. At least at QB2, you have an option to be able to play him, showcase him, and then, in 2024, trade him or do whatever it is that you want with him. Because I think that it's safe to say, Jesse, both of these quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance, won't be on the roster together in 2024. One of them is getting traded, whether it's Trey Lance or Brock Purdy. One of them is getting traded in offseason 2024. But it makes no sense to designate Trey Lance as QB3. The only reason, I think Trey Lance has edged Sam Darnold out. Even though I know you said we'll concede that, we're not. Upside, definitely Trey Lance. The only thing that I could say, maybe Sam Darnold should be QB2 over Trey Lance, and I don't think he should, but usually that QB2 position is like the mentor, right? It's that quarterback that's been in the league already, kind of on the downside. It can kind of help mentor that young quarterback and all that kind of stuff. That's the only thing Sam Darnold has over Trey Lance, is he's been in the league longer and he's older, right? Outside of all of that, I think that Trey Lance will help this team win more games than Sam Darnold will, and that's who should be the QB2. To me, it was sad that Shanahan was still making this a battle. And coupled with how confident and how much praise he gave for Brock Purdy the week before, the statement that he had about Trey Lance was very disappointing to me. So, come Tuesday, like I said, if Trey Lance doesn't have a bulk of the play over Sam Darnold, I will officially downgrade myself to a Shanahan fan.
Let me first of all, I'm going to answer this question, and then I'm going to make a point here for anybody that believes in Sam Darnold still. Yafi says, another Trey show, blah. Get over it, dude. Okay. Shanahan is the one that's made this a circus. He's the one that's made this a sideshow. Okay? He's the one that spent all that capital on Trey Lance, and he's the one that didn't play him in year one. Then he's the one that ran him like a fullback. Then he's the one that said he liked him more than ever, but brought in Sam Darnold. And now, instead of just naming, hey, here's your quarterback depth chart, every week we have the possibility to switch who the second quarterback is. Shanahan has made it a circus. So guess what? When circuses come to town, we talk about it. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So it is what it is. That's what we're going to talk about. But for anybody that thinks that Sam Darnold's that guy, 3 times the NFL has told you that they like Baker Mayfield more than they do Sam Darnold. Let that sink in for a second. All right? So anybody that likes Sam Darnold, you better like Baker Mayfield even more, because Baker Mayfield was drafted ahead of Sam Darnold. Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold were on the same team, and Baker Mayfield was the starter over Sam Darnold. And this offseason, Baker Mayfield got a starting job with a different team while Sam Darnold is in San Francisco competing for a backup spot. So if you like Sam Darnold, I would love to hear all the glowing things that you can say about Baker frickin' Mayfield, who is also buns, by the way. So anytime somebody says, oh, Sam Darnold this, I'm going to say, hey, what do you think of Baker Mayfield? Tell me all the great things about him, because guess what? The league has told you on 3 separate occasions, Baker Mayfield is better than Sam Darnold. That's where we're at. It's absolutely embarrassing. I'm sorry. It's embarrassing. It just is.
And I'm not one to feel, I'm sorry. I'm not one into, trash a quarterback to elevate another quarterback. So that's why I'm not going as hard in the paint as Jesse has over Sam Darnold. But to me, it's just all of the logical sense is go with Trey Lance, and we could just leave it at that.
You know what's funny is I can go find a show. We did a show this offseason. We talked about the possible quarterbacks that would come here, and there was 2 guys that I actually did mention as I thought real possibilities, guys in their careers that would potentially take a backup role if Brock Purdy's not healthy, and potentially a 3rd string role just to kind of resurrect their careers. And those 2 guys were Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. Now, they ended up signing Sam Darnold. Obviously, we just talked about Baker Mayfield. But I was not shocked when they signed Sam Darnold. I am, however, shocked at the way that they've handled Sam Darnold being here, as if he's something that he's not. I can't get over it. I can't. I'm sorry. It's just super frustrating to watch. It's like
we always
had
him
in slow motion.
We always had him behind Trey Lance in any scenario, whether it be Trey Lance is the starter, Sam Darnold's the backup, or Trey Lance is the backup and Sam Darnold's the QB3. Never in our wildest dream did we think that there would be even a discussion about Sam Darnold being over Trey Lance in any scenario.
And you know what's really funny is I've told people for months, like, Trey's better than Sam. Like, what are we doing? There's nothing to prove here. Give Trey Lance every snap. He needs every snap. Well, you don't know he's better than Sam. Every single practice, he was better than Sam outside of like 1. And Sam had the worst practice out of all the quarterbacks. Anytime they were in the move the ball, Sam could not move the ball at all. You're seeing it play out in the preseason games. For one reason or another, they can't put up points with Sam on the field. Sam looks more comfortable in the pocket, and people somehow are okay with that. But they're not willing to watch points go on the board because it might be a little frantic for him. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Absolutely crazy. Let's talk about a little bit more about Trey Lance here and the overall media coverage of Trey Lance. It's funny to me because last week everybody was ready to pile on Trey Lance, and they couldn't wait to say he didn't belong in the league and all these other things. But the moment that he actually played pretty damn well against the Broncos, nobody says anything. I feel like Nick Wright is the only national media person that I've seen, and it looks like Bomani Jones? Bomani Jones? Yeah. Bomani Jones also is on that board. Outside of that, though, nobody is backtracking on anything they said. Everybody's doubling down on what they've said. And the craziest narrative that I heard coming out of this week, both locally and nationally, is that somehow, after Trey Lance led 3 scoring drives, including a game winner, I don't care if it was against your grandmother and mine on that football field, is that Sam Darnold has solidified QB2. We can't control what Kyle Shanahan does. Obviously, what he's about to do is weird as hell. I've never seen anything like it. The NFL's never really seen anything like it. That being said, if that is your honest take after watching that game on Saturday, that Sam Darnold has basically extended the lead on Trey Lance, we can't talk. We can't talk football. I can't take that seriously. I'm sorry. Like, I understand if you're not a fan of Trey or you haven't seen enough to put him over Brock Purdy. I get all of those things. I've said it a million times. Right now, Brock Purdy's the better quarterback than Trey Lance. Now, long term, I think Trey Lance can end up being better, and that's why I take that risk. However, Sam Darnold is not better than Trey Lance. Sam Darnold has never been better than Trey Lance. Sam Darnold will never be better than Trey Lance. And when Sam Darnold clearly doesn't play as good as Trey Lance, you can't even admit that he didn't play as good as Trey Lance. I can't. It's absolutely crazy to me.
You're missing an extremely important part of this narrative. None of them watched the game, Jesse. None of them watched the game. The ESPN Sports Center guy said people who have watched the game said Trey Lance was terrible. Colin Cowherd straight up said, I guess he was good. I didn't watch the game, but there's no way Trey Lance is better than Sam Darnold. When you haven't watched the game and you're making definitive statements about a player's play, you know it has nothing to be, it's not an educated response. It's an emotional response. And emotions are fleeting. Emotions are not facts. Facts don't care about your feelings, right? And for whatever reason, Jesse, and this is the thing that really, really perplexes me when it comes to the national media's position on Trey Lance. One, never in the history of ever, Jesse, has there been so much national coverage over a QB2 position. Like, never is it the leading topic. Hey, we're going to talk about who's going to be the backup for a team. Like, the fact that there's a new report every single, like, I can understand 49er content creators, local beat writers, and all this kind of stuff, but the national media being so focused on a QB2 battle for an NFL team is insane to me, one. And the second is how personal it seems to be against Trey Lance, who has never said anything negative about the media, who hasn't gone out here and made these crazy statements to like, you know, like a Johnny Manziel used to make, or even a Baker Mayfield would make when it comes to media. Never been in trouble with the law. No extracurriculars that he's in the media for the wrong reasons. And you got just all of these dog whistles, and you have this, like, just people that are just killing a kid who's only had 4 starts in the NFL. It's insane to me. It's the wildest thing that I've ever seen. And I could understand if Trey Lance was like, had this personality that just rubbed people the wrong way. But he's the nicest guy ever. Like, he's a great teammate. He's a great on the mic, humble. He's even come out and said, I know I'm not QB1. Brock Purdy deserves QB1. Like, how could you do this to someone who's, I don't know. It's just really, really amazing to me that we're not even talking football about the kid anymore. We're talking about whether or not he deserves to be in the league. We're talking about what his mama saw when he pulled him out of the cradle. We're talking about making statements about him without even watching him play. It's insane, Jesse, and it's hard not to make it about something other than what the kid is as a person and more about what he looks like as a person.
Bro, it's crazy how many hits people get, and I'm starting to realize it. I posted a throw from Brock Purdy, and I said, hey, very solid throw here from Brock. And I posted a throw from Trey Lance on Twitter. The throw from Trey Lance got 44,000 impressions. The throw from Brock Purdy got 9,060. Like, the starting quarterback isn't even the story of this team. It's absolute. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it, especially when the backup quarterback, barring really injury to the starter, has no path to play and isn't the future of this team. I've literally never seen anything like it. It's absolutely crazy to me. It's mind-blowing. It's interesting.
And a lot of people
fun,
are sitting.
But it's
a lot of people are saying it's not about race, and I don't think that any of these guys are necessarily. I'm calling anybody a racist or anything like this, but there hasn't been a quarterback that's been. There's been quarterbacks that have been in similar situations, Jesse, that have never had the type of scrutiny and the statements made about them the way that Trey Lance has been made about him, with absolutely nothing backing it, right? So I don't know. I think the leash that Trey Lance has gotten in for this team is one thing, can be justified away because of what Brock Purdy did, right? But going from last year where Kyle Shanahan said, Jimmy, you can't even practice on the same field as us because this is my guy, this is QB1, to playing one game in 3 possessions before he had a season-ending injury, to now saying he doesn't even deserve to be in the league. That trajectory makes absolutely no sense to me, because how do you say somebody is worse and doesn't deserve to be in the league where the last time he was actually playing, he was the bona fide starter for the 49ers? So I don't know.
But off after a preseason game. So they basically made it sound like preseason means everything, enough to kick somebody out of the league. But a week later, when he plays well, nothing. You don't say a word about it. Nothing. The only word you say is, Sam Darnold widened the lead. What? Based off what? What widened what lead? What are we talking about? Oh my gosh. Yeah, Tom, I agree. That's why I had the discussion yesterday. I'm a day ahead of you. I had it with Rohan. All right, let's talk about the title of this show, which is not necessarily quarterback related, but it is Kyle Shanahan related. He had a very interesting take when it came to his roster building. So here's what he said. He said, this was with Peter King, by the way. He said, that's kind of been the view of how I build a team for me forever. Hoping you can always have a quarterback. Hoping, keyword, as if he doesn't have any play into that, but I'll keep going. But if you can build that defense that way and play the right way, you do have a chance. He then went on to bring up teams like the Ravens with Trent Dilfer and the Bucks with Brad Johnson as talking points, and possibly how he's looking to build his team. What are your thoughts about his roster building conversation?
For everybody that says Kyle Shanahan isn't aware of who he is, this is the statement that I could read into that he knows exactly who he is. And what I mean by that is he knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, and one of his biggest weaknesses, and something that I've never debated anybody, is his QB evaluation, right? He doesn't know how to get the right QB in here. He doesn't know how to evaluate QBs through the draft. I think he could get the best out of a quarterback because of the way he runs his system and the way he schemes people open. But I don't think he knows how to identify that elite quarterback. And because that's not your strength, the only other way to win a Super Bowl without an extremely elite QB is to have a very efficient quarterback, an offense that could put up enough points to win, but an insane defense that is always going to keep you in the game. And I think that was the realest thing Kyle Shanahan ever said, because I think that's the only way he could win a Super Bowl, unless a franchise level quarterback just falls in his lap. And unfortunately, the chances that he did have to get that, he was beat out by, the Rams when it came to Matt Stafford, or, Green Bay didn't give it up when Aaron Rodgers possibly was available. So
yeah.
To
Chose
me,
Jimmy Garoppolo over Tom Brady, didn't scout
right.
Patrick Mahomes, that type of stuff. Yeah. Not his fault at all.
No, but I am giving it that fault. I'm saying that he's terrible at that stuff, right? And not everybody's going to be good at everything. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
He's elite.
And there is a lot that he's great about. That's the thing with Shanahan. And people, I do have to be clear about that. There is so much that Shanahan is good at. So much. Unfortunately for him, in my opinion, he is not good at developing or figuring out who good quarterbacks are necessarily in this league before they become good. And because quarterback is the most important position in football, that can always hold him back from really winning a Super Bowl. But he'll always be competitive because he is such a good coach.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. If he could just have somebody like Andy Reid just choose a quarterback for him, I think
yeah.
I think that Kyle Shanahan would be a Super Bowl winning coach at this point. He really should give all of that power of who the starting quarterback should be to somebody else, because whether or not he could develop a quarterback, I think is debatable, because it's like, what do you consider developing? I personally think that Kyle Shanahan has gotten the best out of every quarterback that has ever played under him. I've never seen a quarterback that's played under him that's gone somewhere else and looked better. So to me, it's like, is that developing? Is that not? I don't know. At the end of the day, you want to get the most out of your quarterback position. I think that's what should be, that's what should be focused on. How the developing thing, it depends on how you define that. But to me, his getting the right person in is where, I think we both agree he's just not good at.
Yeah, most definitely. 49ers Throwback says, this guy gets it. Jesse, this was my quote when I posted the video on Nick Wright. Thanks for your shows. No, 49ers Throwback. Thank you for watching the show and supporting the show the way you always have. Brother Bob says, what's up, Nails? Neil's back on my good side now. Laugh out loud. All right. I didn't know he was on your bad side. That's too bad. But you're back. You can go to the family cookouts with Brother Bob.
Hey,
again,
I could sleep well again. My guy, thank you so much for giving me back the pass.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to say this. His comments by themselves, the quote by itself, was not really all that damning to me. Like, you have to choose a lane and how to build a roster. Where he really messed up to me was bringing up two teams that are the rare exception to winning Super Bowls, and two teams that won 20 plus years ago. One of them, in the Ravens, is arguably the best defense of all time, if not their top three best defenses of all time. So unless you can, he's basically saying, oh, I can go duplicate a top three defense of all time before I can go get a quarterback. That's where his head's at. Like, that's a little strange.
I agree with him too.
And yeah, he might be right. And then the other one, the Bucks, yes, they did win the Super Bowl, but that was crazy circumstances. One, very, very good defense. Not near as good as the Ravens, but still very good. But they also happened to play a Raiders team in the Super Bowl that they literally knew the play calls, audibles, and everything. They knew exactly what was coming all game long. That was a very unique, strange situation. So we're talking about two anomalies when it comes to winning. Really, he can be competitive. And I know that having an elite quarterback does not guarantee winning. Every time I have this conversation, people are like, well, how come Josh Allen doesn't have a Super Bowl? But if you want to be in the conversation of actually competing, you probably most likely need to have that dude at quarterback. You need to have it so much so that most Super Bowls are won by elite quarterbacks, Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks. So what is it? 43 out of 57 Super Bowls won by a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. And that's me not even including Stafford. I don't think Stafford's a Hall of Famer. So yeah, just to be in the conversation, for the most part, you do need a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. The other stuff is the exception, not the rule. So yes, the 49ers are going to remain competitive. Maybe Brock Purdy can do things like Nick Foles or Joe Flacco did, where they aren't elite quarterbacks, but they played elite for a Super Bowl run. I think that is more likely to happen than you winning with a Trent Dilfer type and having the best defense of all time. Like, that's just me personally. I think Brock Purdy getting hot, or any quarterback on this roster that is playing getting hot for a 3-week time span, is more likely to you winning than the other way. And I don't know that that's likely either. So we'll see how this thing plays out. But his philosophy on roster building for being an offensive guy known as an offensive genius, a little bit questionable. It just is. But then, the flip side too, Sunil, is that as a head coach, he's constantly evaluated for just the offense. I'll give you an example. Last year when they were scoring 18 points a game, people were flipping out on Kyle Shanahan. Oh, I thought you were a genius. Why can't you score more than 18? But the defense was legit. He's the head coach of the team. So the defense being good does reflect on him, does it not?
It
Like,
should.
he's more than just the play caller. He is the head coach of the team. So I think he gets less credit than what he deserves in certain areas. And I think he gets more credit than what he deserves in certain areas.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this the referendum on Kyle Shanahan is getting a bit wild. Like I said, I've mentioned, probably on Tuesday, because I do think Sam Darnold is going to get at least even of Trey Lance, if not more. So I'll probably be a Shanahan fan come Tuesday. But, I was on X, and people aren't giving him credit for the coaches that he's developed and made head coaches. All of a sudden
Yep.
now, D'Amico Ryans and Robert Saleh, they developed themselves. Kyle Shanahan had nothing to do with that. I'm like, where in the history of ever does guys that went from a specific coaching staff that they've been on for 3+ years into head coaching, the head coach of that team doesn't get the credit for them being off of their tree? But somehow that's what people are saying as far as the coaching development tree of Kyle Shanahan. I think that at this point, and it could be just because we're in this circle, but a lot of the fan base is just looking for a way to, blame people. And I asked this question to Rohan earlier today, Jesse, and I want to ask it to you too. How many teams do you think right now would not trade the coach that they have right now for Kyle Shanahan straight up?
I would say maybe 6 or 7.
I think that number is actually absolutely fair, right? And that is who a lot of the fan base is saying we need to get rid of. And to me, I think that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he deserves criticism for certain things. Like I said, I do. I believe that he gets too much credit for some things, but I think there are areas like the development of the coaches, like taking a lot of these late picks and turning them into something like, for us to sit here every offseason and say things like, yeah, I mean, you can always count on 2 or 3 players that were late round picks last year that redshirted to be good this year. That's because of Kyle Shanahan. Like,
Yeah.
whether directly or indirectly, whether it's because the position coaches are doing their job and developing or whatever, but Kyle Shanahan put those coaches in place. So directly or indirectly, that's because of him. So he really does get looked at still as solely an offensive coordinator, and that's all he was responsible for. But that is not the case. He is responsible for everything on this team. And so I do think that some people absolve him of blame in certain areas that are clear head coaching decisions because he's the offensive guy. And then there are times where other parts of the team are doing well and the offense may not be, but he gets no credit for that, but he should, because he is the head coach. So it goes both ways. It's an interesting thing to watch. I noticed it on both sides. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. And like the fact that we're even talking about the team we're talking about the team right now, before Shanahan was here, that wasn't the way that the 49ers are being talked about. They were in the media, they were in the news for more what was going on off the field than what was going on the field. And that's a distant memory to now we're like, it's Super Bowl or bust, right? Like that's what the discussion is. And that's great. Like we've changed the culture around it. And one more thing that I think is underrated, Jesse, and you understand this being from Florida, the fact that the 49ers are an actual free agent destination with everything that's going on with California, with the taxes and stuff like that, I think that's a huge feather in his cap, that he's created a culture and environment here where people want to come play for this organization, even though it's going to mean less money for them than if they went to some of these other states where the taxes are so much lower. I don't think people give credit for Kyle Shanahan to be able to do that, because that hasn't been something that the 49ers can necessarily plant their flag in quite some time.
Yeah, I think it sucks because when you're really successful, you kind of are your own worst enemy. And that's where Kyle Shanahan's at. You're right. I mean, the team is completely turned around. The franchise is turned around. But now they're reaching potentially the end of this window to win a Super Bowl. And unlike somebody like Pete Carroll, who won a Super Bowl and then was given the grace to kind of lose it a little bit and then rebuild it the way he's done a fantastic job there. I don't know that Kyle Shanahan deserves that grace if he doesn't win. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
if this window bypasses them and then they become a team that's not competitive for 2 or 3 years, if you don't win a Super Bowl, you probably don't get that grace or deserve that grace. And that's just the way coaching is. So it's a byproduct of his own success now coming back to bite him, which is the way that the league works, I guess.
yeah, I'm with you, and I think your criticism is fair. I think the way that you're going about this segment, Jesse, I'll give you a thumbs up. But you know that's few and far between with me when it comes to you.
Brother Bob says, I take it back. Sunil's too much of a Shanahan.
Dang, I didn't even get no barbecue, brother. I didn't even make it into the show's not even over. How did I already lose my ticket to the barbecue, bro?
He knew you were bringing store-bought potato salad is what happened.
Hey, stop. That's too far, bro. That's too far.
Frank Tom Ocean, member for 5 months. What's up, Frank Tom Ocean? He says, I'm pumped for the regular season. Let's go 49ers. I'm pumped too. We're actually going to talk about some of the things to look forward to or be concerned about, basically, as we head into the regular season. Brother Bob says, who gives a shit? Kyle hasn't won the big one. Why jock him? I don't know, Sunil. Why do you jock him?
Because I look at this, and this is actually a great question, brother. I'll give you my answer. So I look at what it takes to win a Super Bowl and the components that it takes, right? Culture, roster building, coaching staff, all of these things. I see what Kyle Shanahan has brought this team to be. And I see how competitive, and I think I still believe that this foundation and what this team has not only could win one Super Bowl, Jesse, but could win multiple Super Bowls, which is extremely, extremely hard to do. But his biggest weakness is what's holding it back: inability to get the right quarterback at the helm, right? Andy Reid, I always say Kyle Shanahan, to me, the comp is Andy Reid. The only difference between Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan is Andy Reid is much better at getting the right QB there. But Kyle Shanahan's career is very similar to what Andy Reid's career was with the Eagles. And he had Donovan McNabb, who was a great quarterback. But it wasn't until he got Patrick Mahomes that all of a sudden Andy Reid now is considered, the best coach. People are putting up that he might even be better than Belichick, right? So that's why I still, quote unquote, pause, Brother Bob, because I believe we are that, and it is a big piece, but I think the foundation that we've built with this coach can lead to multiple Super Bowls. And I think that sometimes people forget that and just think that, hey, we could just get another coach and all of a sudden, because of the success we're having right now, it's going to happen that way. It has in the past. We've seen, Tony Dungy build up the Tampa Bay Bucks to be a certain way. John Gruden comes in and wins a Super Bowl off of that. We've seen, even here, Bill Walsh builds up a team a certain way. George Seifert comes in and wins a Super Bowl with that roster. So maybe that's possible, but more times than not, Jesse, a new guy comes in and all of a sudden you never reach that same pinnacle again. Very few teams that could continue that type of success with the whole regime shift.
What's interesting, and I was just thinking of this as you were talking. I think the perception is that Kyle Shanahan can never admit his faults and is never willing to work on things. And it's even something that I've said, but now looking back on it, he actually has admitted a big fault of his. He just doesn't know how to fix it. If you go back to when he was looking to get a head coaching position, he said that he wasn't wanting to take the 49ers job because there was no quarterback in place. There was no franchise quarterback. I think that's him telling us he doesn't know how to find a franchise quarterback. He knows that. And so that might be his downfall, and it might be the reason he ends up not being a head coach in this league. And so he was hesitant on taking that job. Now, once he got a 6-year deal, he was like, all right, well, I got the deal. I got the leash. Let's go for it. I'll figure it out. And thus far, he has not figured it out. But he knew back then that this was a weakness of his. He just doesn't know how to fix it.
And coupled with with how he roster builds, he knows it. That's what I'm saying. Like, one of the things is exactly what you said: arrogance, inability to be honest with themselves, all that kind of stuff. I think with the quote you just mentioned and the quote we just talked about, he gets it. He understands that. It just maybe nobody on the team, nobody in the front office knows how to decide that, unfortunately, right? That's what I'm saying. If somebody else could pick his franchise quarterback, that might be much better, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Sean says, the same way we know who Darnold is, we know who Kyle Shanahan is. If Kyle Shanahan is gone, is going to keep kicking bricks, then what are we doing? It seems like fans are content with being a winning franchise. There is no second place trophy. Sean, I've talked about this, and I know a lot of people are happy in this moment that the 49ers are winning, just like we were in the Harbaugh era. But if you remember, just this last season, they celebrated the 10-year anniversary of that Harbaugh team. And all it was they brought the team onto the football field at halftime. They gave him a golf clap and they ushered him off the field. That is how 10 years from now, this Shanahan era will be remembered if they don't win a Super Bowl. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way the league works. You're absolutely right. They don't reward you for being second place, even if it's 1,000 times in a row. Just the way it is. Brother Bob says that's a huge weakness, Sunil. That's his Achilles.
Sure. I'm not arguing that, but you asked me why I still believe in Shanahan. I think that a majority of what he does is elite. Unfortunately, that one spot, which is the biggest spot, right? He hasn't figured out, but I think he understands that's not his thing. Somebody else said, well, why would they trade up to a quarterback if he knows he needed Stafford and Rodgers? I think people are forgetting. I think the original plan was to go get Deshaun Watson with the package they used to move up in the draft. Unfortunately, Deshaun Watson ended up with all the off the field stuff. So they used that same package to move up. They tried to get Aaron Rodgers. They tried to get Matt Stafford. Neither of those things worked out. So then they ended up going with picking somebody in the draft. And unfortunately, once again, that requires Kyle Shanahan picking the right person for him. And, it hasn't worked out up until this point.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. We've seen 2 preseason games. You've heard all the practice reports. We've got 1 preseason game left. And then we've got the regular season upon us. Going into this final preseason game, as the team sits right now, what is a thing or two that you are confident in with this team?
I'm confident that this starting offense is going to be fine. I think the first series we saw Brock Purdy play like Brock Purdy, and the offense moved the way that the offense moved under Brock Purdy. Not necessarily any huge plays that he made, but he got the ball to the right players with the right scheme that Kyle Shanahan did. He showed his elusiveness, and I think everything that he has this offense is gonna be competitive enough to win, which is what we need. I think that we found our Juwan Jennings replacement in the future in Ronnie Bell. I think that that's a big deal because more than likely this will be the last year we have Juwan Jennings on the team. So It's nice to have a guy like that could just step in and, be in that role. And I think that secondary, I was a little bit worried about that. I know we still don't know who our nickel is, but I think that the safeties and at least the starters, and it seems like we might have some depth there behind them, should be okay. Still yet to be seen how great they're going to be, but at least I don't think they're as big of a weakness as I thought they might be.
Yeah, that's actually where I was going to go. I think the 2 areas for me are wide receiver, because we've got 2 that are likely not going to start at least healthy on this roster, and they still are fine because of guys like Ronnie Bell or Conley or whoever they end up having on this team, on this roster to begin week 1. And then you've got guys and Danny Gray, who was developing nicely before the injury. And then obviously we have a guy who was essentially a spot starter last year when they needed him, who's ready to come back as well. So the receiving core I'm very confident in. Also, the secondary, I'm very confident in. That is the one area that Wilkes knows what he's doing. And I know that right now they're kind of mixed and matching. We assume that Oliver would be the nickel. That doesn't seem to be the case, but I think that's fine. We haven't even seen a guy like Luter yet on this roster playing, and that was the guy that most people were very excited about. So once he comes back healthy, you've got even more ammo there. The 49ers are very deep and, more importantly, young in the secondary right now. However, I will say this. I hope that if they're going to kick Lenore inside, I hope Womack is the starter and not Ambry Thomas. I'm rooting for Ambry Thomas. Ambry Thomas has looked good for the most part during the preseason, but I am afraid that once he plays number 1 wide receivers on a regular basis, that's not going to look so well. And the reason that I say that is, in practice, when he was going up against the ones, which happened quite a bit because Travarius Ward would miss a ton of snaps. It was literally, when you play pickup basketball at 24-hour fitness or whatever, and then you inevitably, either you're this guy because you're little or somebody on the other team's little, and you always call out mouse in the house, and you attack that player over and over and over. That's the way it was when Ambry Thomas was on the field. It was like they went into the huddle, said mouse is in the house, attacked Ambry Thomas, and they repeatedly abused that matchup. So much so that by day 4, and Rohan will tell you this, I would turn to Rohan and be like, Ambry's on the field, slant Brandon Ayuk. That's exactly what would happen. Every single time. Like, it was without fail. So he's looked good so far, but he really hasn't played those elite guys yet. And I am concerned that when they actually start playing good wide receivers, the CeeDee Lambs, the DK Metcalfs, what have you, that it's going to look really bad really quick with Ambry. I like the way he's developing. I like the way that he's played so far this preseason. I'm happy for him. He's definitely looking like he's going to make the roster, which is awesome. I was worried about him going into the offseason. However, I would like to see him continue to develop before he starts to play again. I don't have as much confidence in him as I do Womack, but the secondary as a whole, having a guy like Jair Brown coming off the bench, having guys like Luter potentially coming off the bench, or even an Ambry Thomas, Oliver, those types of guys, I am very, very confident in the depth and how young, how youthful this secondary is, which is different than what we've been able to say in the past. The youth has not been there. And I think more importantly than any position, the corner position is a position of youth in the NFL.
I agree. Now we go in negative.
Now we go on, what are you concerned about? Give me one thing that you're concerned about. Let's go back and forth on this one. You give me one, I'll give you one until we finish here. And I don't think there's a lot, right? Like, so we may only go back and forth one time. I'm not sure, but there's definitely a couple that we've got to call out.
Special teams.
It's my number one.
Special teams. This is my number one too. You let me go first, Jesse. That's the problem. That's your fault. That's your fault, not mine.
Hey, I'm a good host. All right.
Jake Moody, my guy. I need to stop backing these Michigan guys because I was really hot on Ambry Thomas when he got drafted in the 3rd round. Really high on Jake Moody when he got in the 3rd round. Shaky. Moody shaky. He's being real moody right now when it comes to his ability to kick field goals. Even the game winner was a little suspect, right? Mitch Wishnowsky, muffin punts in the preseason, my guy. Like, you have one job. Like, you don't have to learn no plays. You don't have to learn no schemes. You don't have to learn. You just got to do the same thing. That's the only thing you get paid millions of dollars to do is punt the ball. And you muffin? Come on, man. Our two starting returners, both injured. Ray's gone. Danny Gray's gone. So that means we're going to our 3rd and 4th kick returners. There is not one phase of special teams that I guess maybe the return game is probably okay. Like uh, kick return, kick, or maybe actually, there's not a phase in special teams right now that is solid or doesn't have major question marks, Jesse. And we know that a lot of games can be lost or won through special teams, and that is one whole phase. There's offense, defense, special team, one whole phase where there's really not one thing that you could look at and be confident in that aspect.
Yeah, I agree. Special teams has been a bit of a disaster, no doubt about it. I would say the other thing that I'm not confident, I only had two. The other thing that I'm not confident in is the depth of this team right now. However, they do have that magic card in their back pocket. And that magic card is once they sign Bosa, they have quite a bit of cap space to go out and make a splash move before the deadline and bolster that depth wherever they see fit, whether that's offensive line, defensive line, skill position, what have you. They can go out and make a move, and that makes me feel a little bit better. But overall, I really think what's happened here is you spent a lot of capital on Trey Lance. You spent a lot of capital on CMC. You've spent most of your money re-signing your very key good players that you've drafted to this team, which is the right thing to do. And because of that, you have not been able to restock the shelves as they come bare. And so they are in a situation right now where that depth is not what we're used to in a lot of these areas. I think the secondary and wide receivers are good, running backs good, but more so in the trenches where it matters most. That's where I'm concerned about the depth. That would be my number 2 area of concern. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the depth is getting overblown, especially on the defensive line. Where all of these players are going to drop down to 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th options. The guys that are being played right now, they're never going to have to play on an offensive line where they look to the left or on the defensive line where they look to the left and they look to the right, and the players that they're looking at on both sides are on the field at the same time as them. So I think that because of how elite the 3 starters are on the defensive line that aren't playing right now, it's really hard to judge how these guys are going to be able to come in spot duty and make an impact. Like the Charles Omenahus, who else? Like Samson Ebacoms, all these kind of players that they were like, we lost these guys. They didn't necessarily look that great when they weren't with Bosa or Armstead and all these guys on the field with them. So I push back a little bit when people talk about the depth, but my hesitation is also on defense. Inability to stop the run. That was something that early in the season last year, Jesse, was a big issue for us, and then they tightened it up later on in the season. Unfortunately, it still looks like they don't know how to stop the run. Like Denver, Russell Wilson was looking like he had legs again. Denver does have good running backs, but they were gashing that in the beginning of the game. They were gashing the 49ers defense, and they were able to move the ball pretty good on the 49ers. And to me, that's a big issue, especially week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers that we know, very physical team with an elite running back there with Najee Harris. So, that was probably something that's a little bit disappointing to me, that defense can't stop the run.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Mike Drops with Monza says, check your Twitter DM. Reed has already told them. So I checked it. I'm assuming these are quotes right after the 49ers played the Chiefs week 1 of the preseason, Lance's rookie year. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike Drops, but I've got to imagine this is where this is coming from. So here it is. Reed added that he feels Lance is in good hands with the 49ers. The Super Bowl winning coach admitted he speaks with the 49ers quite often and has a great deal of respect for the team's decision makers. Those guys are really smart and they've got a feel on it, Reed said. Then he had a quote saying, one is after Reed defended in media. Oh, one. Okay. So that was the first one. I think the second one he's saying is after Reed defended the media coverage of Lance. So I don't know how recent this was, but it says, you're in good hands, Reed said when asked about his first impressions of Lance. So he's talking about the 49ers and Lance being, the second one. Okay, whatever. Either way, he's like typing me as I'm in here. Not good for the show, mic drops. Anyways, it says, you're in good hands, Reed said when asked about the first impressions of Lance. Yeah, he's a good player. He looked very poised, composed, and he had a nice play on the firecracker there that he shot down the field. So I'm assuming that was after the preseason game. Either way, I think his point is that Reed is saying that he would have gone with Trey Lance, I guess is what he's saying there. And then he follows it up and says the saddest part is about those assets is Trey with CMC could be ridiculous and both would ease the game for each other. Those additions would shift you to an offensive first team, but this team wants to be cheap. I hear you, mic drops. I hear you. And then Brother Bob says, Sunil, let me guess. You like what Moody has shown? Obviously, he didn't like what Moody has shown. And then he says, makes sense. He's a Moody stan and a Shanna stan. Oh, man. Brother Bob goes at Larry quite a bit. He's now chosen you as a target, I guess. I guess whoever my co-host is going to get it from Brother Bob. It's just the way that it works. All right, Sunil, thank you so much for joining me. As always, we do this every Tuesday. I hope you guys in the chat, I didn't really see a lot of feedback, but I hope you like the new layout, showing the sponsorships of the show there, giving you a little bit of eye candy with some highlights, some all 22. I think this is the way that I'm going to roll throughout the season. So just give you a little something else to look at while we're talking, maybe set the show apart a little bit from what you're seeing around the internet when it comes to other 49ers content creators, make it a little bit different around here. That being said, I'll be back tomorrow with 49ers After Dark with Grant, and then likely a call-in show for y'all over here at Last Second Sports. Much love. Peace.